Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting here for the Amite River Basin Drainage Commission on this August 8th at 10 a.m. in Ascension Parish Council Courthouse. We'd like to start out with a Pledge of Allegiance. Jack, could you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carter. Mr. Clark.
Present.
Mr. Quintmall. Mr. Webb. I thought I saw Mr. Webb. All right, Ms. Verlito? Weber.
Yeah.
Sorry.
For St. James. Yes.
Ms. Verlito? Present. Ms. Fitch? Present. Mr. Harrell?
Present.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
Mr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Rayford?
Here.
And we have Bryn Haas?
Here.
Ed Knight?
Here.
And Blaine Sheets. All right, thank y'all. We have a quorum.
Okay, do we have any public comments in regards to our agenda? Anybody would like to have some expressive public comments? We can save that for after the meeting. Moving on our agenda, we have a special guest from the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, Office of Community Development, Mr. Pat Forbes. He's going to speak today on the Louisiana Watershed Initiative funding and perhaps some question and answers if we have time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thrilled to be here. I'm sorry we got our wires crossed and I was not able to join you last time, but I'm thrilled to be here now. We have had a watershed council meeting transpire since that last meeting, and so some of the information in here will be different from what we might have seen then, so that may be more enlightening for everybody at any rate. Okay, next slide, please. What I'm going to do is just walk through an update on some information about overall funding around the state, funding relative to LMI and most impacted and distressed requirements, and then we'll go to questions. Oh, thank you. Okay, first slide up here. Oh, whew, right here in front of me. First slide is LWI projects funded by HUD Mid. And so the HUD Mid is most impacted and distressed. When HUD allocated the mitigation funding to the state of Louisiana, they said that at least 50% of the money has to be spent to the benefit of most impacted and distressed parishes that they selected. These 10 parishes you see here are the parishes that are most impacted and distressed as selected by HUD. The other thing that they gave us the opportunity to do was add other parishes as eligible parishes for that funding. Since 56 of the state's 64 parishes got major federal declarations, we added the other 46 parishes to that list as state mids. That does not affect this requirement that at least 50% of the money be spent in these 10 HUD mids. One thing I want to point out, because there were some questions around the allocation of the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program funding. We are funding HMGP match for the whole 2016 disaster, which is 25% of project cost. The way that we do that with CDBG funds is with, when we can do it, what we call a global match project. That is to say, we fund the entirety of a limited number of projects, and FEMA applies all that money to the benefit of all the HMGP projects. So the next slide you're going to see shows where those projects were built. But in this slide, the total funding indicates the benefit that each parish got for HMGP match, plus all the other projects, as opposed to, for instance, we built, I think, two projects in, or funding two projects in East Baton Rouge Parish. They're not showing up in here, just East Baton Rouge Parish's HMGP match requirement is in here that we're covering. So in other words, we've distributed the funding as it applies to the HMGP program. And look, this isn't that many slides, so if anybody's got questions as I'm going through here, fire away. This shows you the difference. You can see we've got 3 projects funded in Ascension. I think there's actually 2 in East Baton Rouge and 1 in Ouachita to cover the match for all the March and August 2016 disasters. But then you can see the actual benefit number in the middle column. That is what is reflected in these numbers here. Any questions there? That's pretty complicated bit of stuff. Okay.
Any questions?
In the packet. For global match for HMGP? Do you have it somewhere else that I don't have?
No, it's not. This is updated. This is from the meeting. This is updated information from the LWI meeting that we had and concerns that were addressed at the state capitol meeting.
So is this available now? This data available to me now?
Well, I mean, yeah, we could.
Yes, sure. We can put it on our website or whatever,
Yeah.
certainly. Yeah, we got multiple requests to make this more easily understandable as it pertains to the actual benefit each parish got, so.
My question, Commissioner Forbes, thank you for being here and presenting today. When you guys are trying to convey this information, this is y'all's attempt to show that y'all are actually spending, according to your action plan, 50% of the total funding that you were allocated via CDBG MIT per the action plan in the 10 MIDs per HUD regs.
That's right, not just the action plan, but as required by HUD.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you're using HMGP dollars to do it.
Nope, no, sir. Sorry. So
That's
great question, great point. The HMGP funds are not in these numbers, just the CDBG MIT that's being spent as match
Understood.
for
Okay.
HMGP.
Thank you for the clarification.
Great question, though.
So Pat, is this final, or is this like in an amendment that's going to be submitted to HUD for approval?
These numbers here are another good question. I should have gone over the heading of the slide first. What these numbers represent is round 1, the state projects and programs, HMGP match, and design support, because those are all already have CEAs out there with people to build them. What's remaining is round 2 and another allocation that's going to be in an action plan. That action plan has to be approved by HUD. And in fact, it will be published with a 30-day comment period. So it's subject to change. It will just be a draft when it's published. And, but that's what the council approved the other day, was publishing a draft action plan for comment. And at the end of the 30 days, we'll take the comments and make whatever changes are appropriate.
So after 30 days, how long is the turnaround, typical turnaround? I know you can't, with HUD, I mean, I know December 31st is coming up, and there's some goals.
They have up to 45 days to approve. So, yeah, we're very cognizant of that timeline and very much want to make sure we get everything that's in there rolling.
Along those lines, your public comment period for this potential action plan amendment is open currently. Y'all
I don't think
debuted,
we published yet. Tomorrow it's going
starts
to be
tomorrow. And
published.
so LWI Region 9 or any other LWI region or anybody that's interested in submitting public comment would have 30 days from tomorrow to submit those comments and to work with OCD and the Watershed Commission to potentially rectify concerns or point out any concerns.
Correct.
I understood that half of the funds had to go to the most impacted areas, but we were on equal footing with the rest of the state for the other close to 600 million. How, has that already been accounted for? What is that money being allocated for, and are we getting any shot at that other 600 million, or have you decided on where that's going?
So the funding rounds so far have not had requirements relative to MID or LMI. They've had points, I think, in round one were allocated for MID and LMI that would give them a boost. But no, there have not been any focus on driving the number there. It's just gotten there on its own because that's where most of the applications have come from that are being funded so far.
Okay, so what about the other 600 million? We've got half of it accounted for here. What about the other 600? I know this money has to be spent within 2 years. Doesn't it have to be spent within 2 years?
12.
12 years? So what's the plan for the other 600?
So what's represented on this, I think this is the right slide for this. Yeah, what's represented on this slide shows that $526 million of projects have already been allocated to whoever the local applicants are.
Right.
And there is another, say, 450 million, I think, that's going to go to projects. The rest, we've got 145 million in models and data and engineering and those sorts of things. There's some other smaller bits. Admin is 4%, but there's about $1 billion in projects in the action plan, and 562 of that has already been allocated to projects.
Right, okay, I understand. What I was asked about was that other 450 million that you spoke of that's allocated for projects. Do we have a list on that yet, or?
No, sir. So what that represents, and I'll talk through that in the action plan discussion in just a minute, but it's mostly round two and then $100 million allocation that is in the action plan for Region 9.
Okay, well, I'll wait till you get to that and see how it shakes out.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pat.
So I think this one's self-explanatory. We've got the actual benefit in that middle. And then on the right side of the numbers you saw previously, which is where we're actually funding the projects, the global match projects. This is current commitments by region. You can see how much each region has gotten. The regions, for your information, the regions that have the most impacted and distressed parishes in them are 3, 5, 7, and 9. And you can see 7 is the outlier there. 3 and 5 and 9 have bigger portions of the funding. Region 4 is also a bit of an outlier. These are the projects funded so far, again, in all those rounds that I've talked about, state projects and programs, round 1, and design assist. And also in the meeting, the council meeting, we were asked to show round 1 allocation specifically, so you can see on the right column here what program each one of these was funded from. Okay, round 2, which we are smack dab in the middle of. You can see the timeline here. And the regional project ratings are due back to the state. That's actually a task that you have in front of you, and that is providing your priorities on which projects to fund of the ones that were submitted from your region and sent back as potentially eligible. Round 2 is 100% low to moderate income benefit requirement. You will see in a second why that is the case. And we expect in November to approve projects from the regions and start the process of signing CEAs. So to the point earlier about the end of the year coming, we would expect all these projects to have been allocated, all the funds to have been allocated by end of year. So, Action Plan Amendment 3 that will be published tomorrow. Couple of smaller things. One, in state projects and programs, currently there is a $15 million program for economic development and resilience. Action Plan Amendment 3 would move that just into state projects and programs for state infrastructure and housing. In other words, taking it out of economic development activity and putting it so that it applies to projects, essentially. Non-federal cost share assistance. We also had $15 million allocated $15 million that we had for match for federal programs. We were able to do that with funding from the Laura Delta IDA allocations, and so this is just moving the money back into projects at the regional level.
Hold on, Pat.
Sure.
Does everybody understand that? That the 15 million from the economic development, how that worked?
This funding, I apologize, I mean,
Because, it's a little tricky.
I just want to understand, LWI is funded mainly with dollars from CDBG that were allocated as a result of the 2016 disaster, but this last point here, you're saying you're pulling money from the action plan from the 2020 and 2021 storms, Laura, Delta, Zeta, to
That's
actually
right.
fund the back end of projects that were allocated from the 2016 event?
That's correct. Before, if you recall, it took 2 years, I think, after Laura to get a federal appropriation of funds. And so initially, the action plan stepped forward and allocated $15 million for match in some of those affected parishes from Laura and Delta. Once we got an appropriation for Laura and Delta, we were able to pull those funds back into the mitigation LWI program. So it's essentially just adding $15 million to the regional programs and projects
Just sort of paying yourself back. in a
budget,
sense.
yes. Just pulling it back since the money's available from elsewhere now, a more appropriate source, frankly. We just didn't know that source was going to be available.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, so by that explanation, local and regional projects and programs increases $15 million. The other thing that the action plan amendment reflects is what I'm sure all of you have seen in your regular business, and that is that since we got round 1 project applications in and the state projects and programs, all of those things occurred in 2021, spring of 2021. We've had a huge amount of inflation. And so the fear is that those projects may all be underfunded and unable to be constructed. So what this action plan amendment reflects is an addition of $30 million to round 1 and to the design support program to cover the inflationary pressures on projects in those rounds that would have been submitted back before the inflation was so bad. It also increases round 2. Round 2 was originally published as a $100 million program. It increases Round 2 to $225 million. I think we got $2 billion worth of application, $1.2 billion worth of applications for Round 2, something like that. And so it appears that we can invest all the money immediately in Round 2. It also allocates $100 million specifically to Region 9 for large transformative projects. And it eliminates Round 3 as currently described in the action plan. So in other words, all the money is moved up to Round 2, including a $100 million allocation to Region 9.
Does anybody have any questions?
I'll let Gary go first.
So, a couple of things. What was the original amount of Round 3 funding that was set forth in the action plan?
I'm not certain. How much?
$100 million.
$100 million.
So we also have a modeling program that's set up for LWI that was done as a part of the Watershed Initiative. And so it seems like through this action plan, there was always an attempt or at least a discussion around being able to use those modeling results to be able to scope these projects or figure out where the most benefit would be provided. Have y'all given any thought to the fact that evidently you won't be able to do that with any of this funding? The
Certainly.
modeling results that we're going to have produced won't be used for any of this funding to figure out where the best bang for the buck is?
Yeah, we certainly have.
Is there some type of back end where we'll be able to, there's additional funding coming from another disaster, we may be able to use that?
We are absolutely continuing to explore additional funding sources like the bipartisan infrastructure law and others. And in fact, we do outreach and education for all the regions on the things that we learn about those programs. So that, I mean, ultimately, the Watershed Initiative is not just about spending $1.2 billion. It's about changing the way that we're going to manage flood risk. And so that means that we've got to continue to find other funding sources. And so, yes, while it's disappointing based on the timing of the availability of the models for that work and the timing of the funding going out that has to be spent, 50% of it has to be expended in 6 years and 100% in 12 years from the date of agreement, which was in September of 20. So the idea is that we get these projects going. That does not diminish the value of the models. Certainly, it would be great if we had all the models sitting in place when we started investing $1 billion in projects, but we didn't. That's just not the way the funding came. So, yeah, that's certainly a concern. And I don't know, Billy, do you have anything you want to add to any of that?
So,
Tell me.
for the record, Billy Williamson with DOTD. I'm kind of the modeling lead for LWI on this. The concept being is we want to set up ourselves, unfortunately the inflation hit us at the absolute worst time for our funding source. But the concept is that we don't want to be back at the point where we were 2 years ago with getting a lot of kind of half-baked project ideas. Because, we can all sit here and think that this money is ending, but it would be foolish for any of us to think that this is the last disaster that is going to hit us. We've been hit with disasters we haven't received funding for yet. And so it's going to keep coming. The idea is that we can get these models out there and do some of these project evaluations for these bigger projects before that funding hits. So that we're not where we are now going, okay, we finally got this project evaluated, but the funding's all gone. And so this will absolutely set us up for all those future sources of funding that come through.
Thank you. Mark?
Pat, how much has been spent on modeling to date?
So right now in contracts, we have probably about 78.5 that are actually under task orders. We've got under that data and modeling, we also have the purchase and installation of like 100 river and rain gauge networks. That's another big cost. We're looking at right now, as part of our last Watershed Council meeting, we approved a task order, an additional task order for design storm development, and consequence modeling. So that's taking all of these calibrated models. In our calibrated models, it's going to come with the storms that we calibrated to. So those historical storms. You'll be able to go and evaluate it off of, 2016 or 1983 or whatever those different storms were. But then whenever you ask what's that 100-year or 1% storm, that's not built into it yet. That will be in task order 4 so that we can build those probabilistic, say not fully probabilistic, but probabilized design storms so that you can then start doing apples to apples comparisons objectively on what the real impacts of these are. And so we'll have across the state consequence modeling built off of those that will basically even the playing field, and it will show all the impacts of these projects, not just the intended impact. And so that's the important part, is you're getting a suite of storms to bounce off of.
Okay.
And the total budget for modeling and gauges and all that is $145 million.
That's what I was wanting, thank you.
And that's been in the action plan from the beginning.
Commissioner Quinmont, do you have a question?
All right, where do I start? Okay, so round 2, when it was originally had 100 million in it, would that have met your LMI requirements for projects of LMI?
No, sir. We are at, I've got a slide I'm going to show you here in a second, but we're at something like 32% allocation for LMI right now. Besides the $100 million that's set aside for Region 9, essentially every penny has to be spent on a low to moderate income project to hit the 50%. That's what our math shows.
Okay.
Now, I want to make sure this is clear, because this is a difficult concept too. The things like administration and modeling, those pieces that are not project specific essentially get left out of the numerator and the denominator. So our 50% on projects and LMI is going to be essentially half of the 952 million that's allocated for projects in the action plan, not half of the 1.2 billion.
Okay. So,
Because there's no way for us to associate a LMI benefit to the modeling other than that it reflects whatever we spend on the projects.
okay. So just for the record, and I just want to make a point, I just have a tremendous issue with LMI in general, okay? I think the maps are flawed. I think when you look at both federal maps on how the feds calculate it, there's differences. I know that there's places in Ascension that are low to moderate income that are not on the map and are not done, and I'm assuming that is all through the Amite River Basin and probably across the state. So when you consider these projects as LMI, how is that decision made on whether it affects it or not? And I guess, just having the issue of when you do modeling and you're improving this model for future projects over LMI, I don't understand how it's not added either. So, here's these special rules, I guess, and it's so segmented and I believe to be flawed. How are LMI calculated to determine regional projects don't fit or cover an area of LMI? Who makes those decisions, and where is that data that can be looked at to be quantitated and qualified?
So the low to moderate income calculation approach is not changed basically since I've been in this business, and HUD has always had a requirement. Their regular programs are 70%, and we ask them to get it to 50% for mitigation because of the reasons that you're mentioning. It's almost impossible for us, based on the LMI calculation method that we are tied to demonstrate primary LMI benefit on a large regional project. That is, in fact, why the last $100 million that doesn't require LMI is being allocated to projects that are large and transformational, because it's so difficult to get LMI benefit on a big project. The way to answer your question, each project that gets done is going to have modeling, and it's going to demonstrate who the beneficiaries are, who are the people whose flood risk was reduced, and those people will live in census tracts, and you take census tract data from all the impacted census tracts and add them together and see what the answer is. The math is the same as the math has been since I've been doing this, and I think since they started.
Okay. Well, I just,
And it's
Just
frustrating as it is for us trying to use something like a $1.2 billion grant to make sure that we do big things that help a lot of people. It's the rule, and we've made clear to HUD how that rule impacts us. We have made your point to HUD, along with all the other recipients of these mitigation funds around the country. We have gotten together and sent a letter to HUD saying what I've just said 3 times, so I won't repeat it.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's just, floodwaters don't care if you're rich or poor. They don't care. It floods you regardless. And, to have it so specific on a particular category of our society, only costs the federal government more money in bailouts. And that's the problem. And that's the issue I see with all of this is that, here we can solve problems to save the federal government money, but you're refusing to allow us to do that. So it's going to end up costing the taxpayer, because that's who pays it all, more money in the end because of these silly rules that we have to adhere to. And to move $125 million into round 2 with this LMI category when we possibly could have used that $125 million on projects that could have bypassed that LMI requirement, but we can't because we have to meet the 51%. It's ridiculous in the grand scheme of trying to protect residents. And that's my issue with it. And look, I'm going to move on quickly because I got a ton here and I don't want to hold this whole thing up.
Well, I will say that, in our work, we certainly see that low-income families are more impacted by disasters. They live in the more dangerous areas generally, and HUD recognizes that the most vulnerable communities have also been underinvested in the past. And so that's the explanation for why they continue to require low to moderate income benefits. The case that we've made is that when you do a big project, you might actually help more LMI families by doing that because it's more cost effective and more effective at reducing overall flood risk, but the percentage doesn't work out. And so we certainly have been making the case for changing how this is done, but this is the rule we have at this point.
So the $100 million that has been dedicated on your item there for Region 9, so there's some language in here that we're concerned with. Covered projects is defined by an infrastructure project costing a total of $100 million or more with at least $50 million in CDBG funds regardless of source, CDBG disaster recovery and CDBG national. So I guess this $100 million, what are our limitations for ARBC on spending this money? It's great that LMI is removed, obviously, from our previous conversation just now. But what are the other restrictions that will be put on this $100 million that I'm not aware of today?
Well, it's in this slide that I've just put up. Essentially, we went back and looked at the language for covered projects, and we misunderstood it when we were discussing it in the council the other day. So what it is $100 million or more in a single project, and at least $50 million of that is CDBG funds of any kind. And so we are not proposing requiring that Region 9 do a covered project. And that's what we said in the meeting the other day. That is not part of what we've got in this action plan, but that it's got to be, if you do a covered project, here are the additional things that you have to worry about. And that is, it takes an action plan amendment to HUD, a substantial action plan amendment. It has to demonstrate through a benefit cost analysis that it's actually going to reduce risk more than it costs. And you got to have a long-term management efficacy plan in place. But that is not a requirement that you have covered project with this $100 million. And that is what we said the other day, but we misunderstood what covered project definition was.
Yeah. So transformative project. Can you define what that is?
The idea is that it's a large project and that it is large in the sense of benefits in reducing flood risk reduction.
Okay. And when is, so this 100 million, if it's approved by HUD and we get through all of that, when is ARBC's deadlines for submittals of projects? And, you know, how does this process work, similar to what we've done in round one, round two, and then the special allocation of the dam projects?
So I guess it's going to be somewhat similar to in round one, there was an allocation to each region, and that region decided what projects they wanted to fund with that allocation. This is the same thing, it's just a much bigger allocation. So there would be no reason, for instance, that you couldn't start talking about what projects you want to do right now, on the assumption that our action plan amendment is going to be approved. We've got, 2.5, 3 months before action plan amendment 3 will be approved.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be able to sign a cooperative endeavor agreement, for instance, until that occurred. But there's nothing to say that the ARBC couldn't start the work of deciding what you want to spend $100 million on.
Okay. So, and so just to kind of clarify, I mean, obviously, when this group submitted all of our number ones, those were basically our those large mega projects. I call them mega projects, essentially what I call them. So I guess my question is, a lot of those were close to 100 million. So do we need to break this down into phases, and then we can prove the benefit? Because obviously when you talk about these regional projects, right, and you look at the effect that they may have from one region or one parish or multiple parishes to the others, you have to offset that risk, right? You have to offset that impact. And it's easy to say that, well, the model doesn't show it, but we all know better up here, at least most of us do, that it does. And so to be able to fund several mega projects that help offset the impacts of each other is important, I think, to a lot of my colleagues up here. And so, and we have some, some outlying projects in St. James and East Feliciana that we need to consider as well. But, I think that is my point, that these are so big, they are 100 million almost each. And so will we be able to break these down in phases but show the overall benefit of how they interact with each other and how the overall scope of how we're investing this money? And I guess that's where I get into limitations, because that's what we have to balance out up here. What's happening in East Baton Rouge? How that's affecting Ascension and Livingston? What's happening in Ascension? How it's affecting Livingston and St. James? I mean, that's the reason why this commission is formed like it is, so that we have to have those hard discussions about how we're affecting each other. So 100 million is not a lot of money when it comes to mega transformational projects. It's just not. And so we have to be very cautious on how we spend that, because I don't believe we can dump it all in one project, because that project will affect other parts of the Amite River Basin in a negative fashion, and we have to offset that. And if we don't, then shame on us. So we're going to have to be able to balance this money out to a degree of these transformational projects in order to, I guess, create the magnitude of what this commission wants to do, which is lower flood risk.
So I think the only question in there about our CDBG requirements is about phasing, and we wouldn't weigh in on whether you decide to phase projects or whatever. What I would say is that an application that we get from Region 9 for a $50 million project has to demonstrate that it meets a national objective at the end of that $15 million expenditure. It can't be the beginning of a project that actually doesn't provide benefit in and of itself. So we wouldn't restrict you from phasing, but the CDBG requirement will be that you meet what HUD calls a national objective at the end of that expenditure.
So with a lot of grants, I'm sorry. So with a lot of grants, it requires that you do a resolution committing your commitment to fund additional future parts of that match and grant and phases and all that, even though you really don't have the money. So are you saying that it must be 100% funded with this money, and if the project's 60 million and we can say 40 million, but we pass a resolution that either the parish through a CEA or that commits to finishing the project or commits to the funding, similar to a grant, would that be acceptable?
Certainly, if you have other funds available that you have for the project, and the project total cost is more, that's fine, as long as the end of the CDBG expenditure results in meeting a national objective. But those funds have to be available. It can't be like a future, we
budget
promise
item.
we'll do this or whatever.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm taking too much time.
No, you're not. Clint, I mean,
Just have one real quick programmatic question. If it's non-transformative, is there a BCA requirement for any of these project submittals? If we submitted $100 million projects, would we have to submit a BCA for each one? Or is the BCA kick in only if it's transformative at 50 million or more?
So I want to change the language. I think you mean to say covered, because this covered project that's in quotes,
Oh, gotcha. Yes.
that's the language that's in HUD's Federal Register notice.
Yes, sir.
If it's a covered project, which is to say at least $100 million and at least 50 in CDBG, it's got to go through all that action plan amendment, BCA, all that kind of stuff. Anything below both of those thresholds, it does not have to do that.
That's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Excuse me, this may be a moot point, but I'm trying to get a handle on this because we know that these major projects that will really make a difference, like Clint said, you're talking about $100 million projects. And we know the LMI, half of it has to be spent on LMI, and these are small projects, regional, local things. So why would we not say, all right, we're going to allocate half the money, which we're glad for the 100 million, don't get me wrong on that, but why wouldn't we say, all right, we're going to do 600 million on big projects because that's what really is going to make a difference, and the other ones would go for LMI and these smaller projects. But the round one and round two, especially like with round two where you've got a cap of 15 million, that's nothing but small projects. You can't do anything significant with those. Why do we spend so much money on small projects instead of spending it on the ones that really make a difference for everybody? LMI, it doesn't matter. The big projects like these three that we had, we said they're all about 100 million apiece, and
We still have to calculate low to moderate income in the way that HUD defines it. And in the process of doing that, you are almost by definition going to wind up with smaller projects.
right, and half of them would have to be that, but the other half could be big projects. So dedicate 600 million to the big projects and 600 million to
That is, it's in essence what we're going to wind up with. When we're done, all the math that leads to this action plan amendment gets us to 50% LMI.
Right, but we're only going to be able to do one big project. With 100 million, we can only do one.
I would contend that the $42 million on Highway 22 is a big
Yeah,
project,
that's a
that the $25 million on Highway 82 in Cameron Parish or Vermillion is a big project.
Okay.
But those were the things that were funded early on, and neither of those is likely to be low to moderate income benefit.
Right, okay.
So
Well, that's.
it's just where
that's
we
two-
are right now
220
at the
out of
writing of
600.
this action plan amendment. we have to dedicate all the rest of the funding besides that 100 million to low to moderate income projects. That's where we are.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on. Go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm almost done. So this, we've talked through all this already. We're currently at 34% LMI, which is what's driving us to allocate the additional 225 million in LMI projects. We've been through this ad nauseum, the challenges of hitting LMI, and you can see the LMI areas overlaid with the most impacted and distressed parishes here.
You know, Pat, on the LMI map, it's a shame that the LMI map and the census maps don't have a hook layer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I think, so I think that I never actually said this in answer to President Coimond's question earlier too, is about how do you determine that? And so you're going to get a lot of projects back in round 2 from the Watershed Initiative folks that may or may not be LMI benefit. But what we're saying is when you go model this thing out and see who the beneficiaries are, it may be, and we don't want to cut it off now without knowing that. So figuring out who the beneficiaries are and then calculating the low to moderate income benefit is going to be a critical part of that process. And I'm sorry, the chairman of the Watershed Council is here, and I've been doing all the talking. I don't know if Mr. Tingle has anything to add.
Thanks, Pat. Casey Tingle, Chairman for now of the Watershed Commission and Director at GOSEP. I thank y'all for the opportunity to present and to have some of these discussions. I would only add a couple of things. Certainly, Pat has the programmatic knowledge of HUD funding and how that works. I think when we look back historically, some of your questions and some of where we are now in this process recognizes that when we started this endeavor, there was lots of things to learn and lots of things to figure out. And one of those things that when we looked at the state level here, and one of the charges that we got from the governor was to put in place a framework that could better deal with the flood risk across all of the state, recognizing some of the same conversations that y'all are having. It's just so happens that the Amite River Basin Commission had a head start on all of that because you started this decades ago, and looking at what that partnership would look like across parish and other political boundaries and that sort of thing. We had to start that from scratch everywhere else in the state. The second piece of it is that we knew at the time that while we had pockets of very good data in certain places across the state, in general, we did not. We were starting with a blank slate, and for the most part, we had partners sitting across the table thinking that they had an idea of what might solve their problem, but A, not knowing if it would actually solve the problem, and B, not knowing if it would cause a problem for somebody else downstream or upstream. You all, again, have a bit of a head start on that because you've been doing this for a long time. And so I would just say all of that to me ties together to the point about, halving the funding towards LMI versus non-LMI. When we went into this, our first round of funding, and Pat can correct me if I'm wrong, was to get the ball rolling on incentivizing partners to be working together to develop projects and get projects actually moving, knowing we didn't have models and having somewhat of a reluctance to put big projects out there without some ability to model those out and know that if we were going to have problems in a project because it was going to cause downstream or upstream impacts, that it was a relatively localized project, it was a relatively small project, and that the members of that region had an opportunity to engage around that project. And that, I think, pushed us to doing larger projects later, hoping that the modeling would be in place to be able to incentivize and inform how those projects would actually move forward so that we reduce the likelihood that big projects may cause big benefits for somebody, but big problems for somebody else, because that's not where we want it to be. I would say that, again, because of the way the modeling effort kicked off, you all are still ahead of the curve there, because your model was done very early on in this process and was actually kind of the tool by which we figured out how to do the models everywhere else. And so when it came time to talk about Region 9 in particular, that's why there, I think from our perspective, is not a lot of hesitation about funding and doing a big project here, because you already have a model at some level of development and maturity that you can use to make informed decisions about that. So certainly we've all got a lot to learn. We are learning lessons in this region that are applicable to all the other regions of the state, largely because you've been doing this longer. You've got more experience with what it looks like to coalesce around the COMED and some of the other projects that have come out of 2016, some of which have been on the books for a long period of time. And then recognizing you as a specific region in Region 9, I think is also helping us to communicate to the other parts of the state where right now their regional framework is informal, whereas yours is formal. You've got a legislative mandate, you've got requirements in terms of what you do and expectations, and that's the model that we want to build out across the state. Certainly projects are a huge part of this conversation, and spending the $1.2 billion in CDBG funds is a primary charge that we have. But at the end of the day, that's just a drop in the bucket to the problems that we face. And we have to leave the infrastructure and the framework in place so that when the next round of funding comes in play, when the next disaster happens, that we're having an informed conversation from the very beginning, not starting from a blank slate like we had to do in so many parts of the state in 2016. So I want to thank you all for your leadership in this, your ability to demonstrate not that it's easy to work together, but that it's necessary to work together, and appreciate your support. And at the state level, recognizing that it's our job to help support you any way that we can. And so whether that's information like we provided here today, or sidebar discussions to kind of talk through specific issues or specific projects, I just want to commit to you that we're available to do that and support you in any way that we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Casey. Anyone have any questions? Ready to wrap this up? Clint?
Okay, well, I want to, just like Chairman Tingle, thank you all so much for the opportunity to come share information, and I will tell you something that we've said 2 or 3 times before, which is that y'all, as Casey has said, y'all are the leaders in this. You are also our clients and partners in this. Any information that we have is your information. Any data we have, anything that you think we have that would be helpful, it's yours. So all it takes is asking us for it. So look forward to working with you as we work through this process, again, as Casey said, that we haven't been through before, particularly how we'll do this $100 million allocation and all. But I think that should be interesting, but also not extremely difficult. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Mr. Weber.
On the LWI-funded projects, I see St. James Parish is not listed as a HUD mid, but it's a state project. Is that published somewhere where we can look at it? It's probably there. I just don't see it on your website.
It is. We can get you, we lumped all the state mid projects into one row on that sheet, but we've got them for every single parish. We've got it broken down by parish, and we can certainly send that to you.
Thank you.
It may even be on our website right now, but if not, we'll email it to the group.
Thank you.
Pat, one more thing. Sorry. Okay. For watershed coordinator, administrative assistance, we're essentially acting on nothing, So is there any insight on when that might come to fruition, if ever, or not?
Yes, so we have gone back and looked at the original action plan, the action plan amendment that we did last year to create Region 9, and it does not appear that we need any action plan amendment whatsoever now to be able to provide the 800,000 regional capacity building grant to Region 9. So that really doesn't even have to wait on approval of this APA 3. It just requires an application from Region 9 to the initiative, and we can process that. It is specifically for expanded capacity, so it can't pay for ongoing activities or expenses that you have, but you can add planners, engineers, watershed coordinators, et cetera, with this funding.
Anything perhaps, maybe, we're looking to hire an executive director. They're going to be probably playing multiple roles. I mean, I can tell you all about it.
Well, certainly, we should just talk about that. I think you complete your application. We can talk while you're developing the application about the sorts of things that other regional coordinators, the skill sets they have, that sort of thing. And we'll just arrive at something that makes sense for the region.
Okay. Thank you, Pat.
On to item 6.
All right. Moving on to agenda item number 6. Approval of the minutes.
Is there
Got a motion?
Any public comment?
Any public comments?
Hearing none, there's a motion.
Hearing none, there's a motion from Commissioner Quintmall,
Second.
second by Commissioner Harris.
Any opposition?
Any opposition?
Hearing none.
Hearing none, it's approved.
Next item is number 7.
Next item on the agenda is approval of our financial statements. Any public comments on that? Do we have a motion to approve our financial statements ending July 31, 2023?
Motion.
Motion by Commissioner Harris,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Rayford. Any opposition? Hearing none, is adopted. Okay. Item number 8, report from the president. I just want to say that, it's exciting times. It's challenging, but nevertheless, I believe there's light on the horizon. And it's just a classic example of what we can do if we work together, and that's what we've been doing. That's the best thing we have. However, I can say I've heard from some people a lot of ayes. I challenge everybody to say we, because it is we. Because no matter how brilliant your mind or strategy, if you're playing a solo game, you're always going to lose out to a team. Alone we can do little, together we can do so much. So I say this because I'm just trying to keep everyone recognizing what we have special here and what is yet to come if we can continue to work together as a team. Look at the rest of the state, Region 5. They're modeling exactly what we're doing now, what we've already done. They want to beat us. So here we are. Let's stick together as a team and keep working like we're doing. None of us is as smart as all of us. So I'm just trying to inspire us, the ARBC, don't keep the faith. And we'll get there. So that's all I have to say. Next item on the agenda is report from our legal counsel.
I'll reserve till we get to an item that's specific, nothing particular.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is under old business is the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, Round 2 deadlines, ranking, criteria, timelines as Region 9 Steering Committee. Any public comments on that? Okay, so essentially what we've done is Region 9, we have projects that have been submitted to Region 9. And the board members have been given an opportunity to go through and rank each of the projects. I say rate each of the projects, high, medium, and low, priority based on the three forms of criteria. So we've done that, and we've come to a list that has been narrowed down, and so does everybody have that list in your packets? Okay. If I'd like to open this up for discussion. Take your time. If you don't have a copy, we'll get you a copy. So, do we want to go through this?
I think just ask, has anybody not been able to make these ratings, and is everybody comfortable with where we are? This is a collect.
I'd like to comment on one. Originally on this,
What number is it, Jack?
I'm talking about 1088 and 1070. Originally, that was one project that was submitted by East Feliciana Police Jury, and it was about $30 million. And of course, at that time, the limit was $15 million for our project. So the police jury met with the representative from East Feliciana met with LMI and actually broke that into two projects.
LWI.
I'm sorry, with LWI, and broke that into two projects, one north of Highway 10 and one south of Highway 10. It was actually originally one, like I said, one project, and I see on here it was, the lower part was rated across the board high, but the northern part, north of 10, came in as medium. And I'd like to see that put back together. It was actually one Ed, do you have a comment on that?
Sure. When I did this, I had it all as one project. It was a little over $27 million. It encompassed the north of Highway 10 was a community center that flooded in 2016. Got 5.5 feet of water in it, so it was unusable. South of Highway 10, portions of the town of Clinton, Louisiana flooded. The clearing and snagging of this, I even had Stoker Brown had went, and we had retained him previously by ARBC to do a look at the commit. Well, in the process of the commit, I went to doing some digging and found where in that East Feliciana Parish, those areas did flood within Pretty Creek and Redwood Creek. So we accomplished the deal with LWI to sit down, and with Danica Adams, we sat down and we drew up a plan to fit that model in those areas. So that was, it was just under, a little over 27 million, short of 30, but it was in a poor, destitute area, low income. It fits all the criteria for LWI for that low income area. So when I seen this and talking with Jack, it just seemed, I was kind of suspicious here. How would we go about changing this back to a high priority? Because when it flooded, we had a cattle farmer that lost beef cows in the flood. He wasn't able to move them. So in all these areas, we had residents with 8 foot of water in their homes. This is something that we've been working on since I've been on this commission, and finally made headway since the new commission took over. So, yeah, I would like to be able to see this change back to a top priority in those areas, because those people's homes flooded. HUD did come in one area, and instead of moving those individuals out of that floodplain, they left them in the floodplain but elevated their homes. So it didn't really solve anything. So the next step was, that's never been done since 1952, was the last time those areas were cleaned in those tributaries. So now we're having an opportunity now to get it done. We do have a maintenance plan in place within the parish to make sure those floodplain areas stay clean, because they've never been cleaned since 1952. So we've had major storms. I went back and looked at the declaration for disaster area. Ida, East Feliciana Parish was in that disaster area that was declared by the governor's office in the state of Louisiana. So I'm asking that we go back and we fix this.
Okay, definitely noted. All we're looking at right now with these ratings is we're trying to keep with schedule with the round 2 funding and a deadline. And these are the ratings based on what each of the board members, each of the board members provided. And it's how it shook out up to this point. So obviously, we're going to look at this, and our final date to submit this, I believe, is here shortly this week after this meeting. That was our goal. The deadline is obviously August 31st. So definitely heard and noted. Does anybody else have any other comments? Commissioner Weber.
Why St. James wasn't offered the same opportunity as EBR.
Not the
This is
same.
round 2. So this, but,
Yes.
okay.
This is Watershed Initiative.
Two.
Yes, and, round 2.
Got it, okay.
And what we talked about was something separate.
So in round 3, is that going to be the same if it exceeds the cap on that, or we're going to
Yeah,
be off
there's
of
no
that?
round 3.
Got it.
Round 3 has increased
That's
round
the
2
ones.
by
So it's still got the
225.
same cap, 15 million? Got it, okay. All right.
Any more questions? Commissioner Quint Mall.
Just a point of note, I just didn't like how the rating system was, but I prefer to rate these in order, so you can kind of say what's most important versus what's not, instead of this
So
low to medium, high, or whatever.
So you're talking about on the
categories.
spreadsheet, have them listed in order?
I think it would be better clarification on which ones tend to be higher priority for the commission versus, I got 2s and 3s and 1s, but I really don't know how's this broken down, which ones made the highest, which ones made the lowest,
Okay,
and how the rating system worked in general.
what we did is follow the policies and procedures for rating round 2 projects in accordance with the Watershed Initiative.
And it just, it's a little late. I just would have liked the opportunity for us to, as a commission, to rate these in a little bit more of a high, to low fashion, and not just a 3-category rating system. But in the end, we could have made it fit that, but I think that's.
3 categories always going to be an average of
Yeah.
medium.
And I guess that's my point. And so who's really deciding what the priorities are of this at the end of the day?
Goes back to them.
See, and I guess that's my concern.
Yep.
Is we really haven't put our full weight, and that's,
Ultimately, it goes to the Watershed Council
Yeah.
to score. They have a scoring system.
I
Decide.
understand. It's just hard to tell where all these fall out, and I can understand Mr. Parker's frustration, because I would share that with him on how this kind of shook out here. That's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Weber, you had a question?
And I just want to be clear, I realize the projects that we discussed for the 100 million that we were in Baton Rouge, but there was another project that was submitted in round 2 from St. James that was declined because it exceeded the $15 million cap. So, but these other two exceeded the $15 million cap, so we're going to be offered that same opportunity for that project that was submitted here? Do we know yet?
All right. In the absence of a watershed coordinator and as president, chairman, all of this has been, not all of it, but most of it's been coming to me, and I disseminate it, Tony, accordingly. We receive different versions of our project list, and our latest, greatest version is somewhat different than what we had when we actually rated these. In fact, 2 projects were added.
And look,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Casey, Pat, I mean, can y'all perhaps shed some light on this? Okay. The question is, okay, we have a project list, and it's been several versions of it, as we progress through time. That's been given to us by Miss Kathleen Lund, Miss Lund. And so the question is there were projects that were on there that we thought were the projects, and then some projects came after that we didn't get a chance to score, and then some projects were left off. And then, like Mr. Parker's project, he feels like it should be on there at the top.
I think it was the LMI assessment needed. I think the later spreadsheets that we received did not include the verified assessments for
Get
LMI.
spreadsheets from
Miss Lund.
Yeah, our projects are verified and need assessment. All of it. We ranked all of them.
So my understanding of the process is we got all the round 2 pre-applications in, and then sent back out the list that if the parish or the whoever the applicant was said that it was LMI benefit primarily, and it was under $15 million, and any other criteria? That was primarily it. It's coming back to you as a potential to select for round 2 submittal.
Go ahead, Larry.
What do I do here? When we got the information, Pat, from Ms. Lund, she gave us the list. Initially, there was one project, I think for East Baton Rouge Parish, that was 15 million that was told, no, we're not going to be able to do that. Then we were told later that we could rate it, but we would
I think it was 15 million plus.
Correct.
Okay.
And then what she told us to do, and this is in reference to Mr. President Clemont's comment, we were given low, medium, and high. So these ratings are these 3 different categories. There was no ranking by us, as he commented, as what we thought was the most important. As we understand, this then goes back to LWI, and y'all make the final decision, but we were just a step in the process, correct?
That's right, to identify your highest priority projects.
It was
That was the problem. The criteria that we were given to rate it by didn't give us the opportunity to rate it as we saw the priority in our area. It was by a criteria that may score based on the way we had to rate it, may score it a medium, when all of us agree this is a high project. If this is something, if we only going to get so many, this is one we definitely want to get in. But by rating it according to the criteria that we were given, it winds up being medium. So can we go back and give you our rating of here's our priorities of the projects based on our own priorities?
Yeah, I'm not positive what the
suggested.
action plan
We got to respond to it.
requires us to do.
Eligible applicant will commit funds in excess of $15 million cap.
Okay.
We weren't given that opportunity.
Okay,
to
so
even
what
address
happened
it.
there was much to my surprise. We had already rated our projects on a Thursday, and that come to us on a Friday at 5.
And
5
I
p.m.
realize I'm getting on this board a little bit later than most of you guys, so I'm trying to, I'm drinking from a fire hose here, but I'm trying to figure out why was some parishes offered that opportunity and some weren't. I just want to be transparent. I want to know why
We
that.
don't know why
Okay.
St. James was not in the list, but this was the list sent to us by LWI.
Okay.
See, Mr. Weber, we don't pick and choose amongst ourselves who, it's all fair game, who submits a project and stuff. And then that goes to LWI, and there's certain criteria to determine what's eligible and not. 15 million, and there may be exceptions later on, presumably, and the LMI criteria and so forth.
And just to understand the impact on the watershed, St. James is the alluvial plain. It all stops here, so it's we need to take that into consideration when we're considering all these other projects that are putting water in that alluvial plain.
Janaea Lathers, Louisiana Office of Community Development. To address Mr. Harris's question in terms of the prioritization that each region is giving, you can add within your high rankings the priorities in which the commission sees fit for your region in terms of mitigation and funding projects within your area. We are looking at y'all's high ratings in terms of priority of what we will look at further in terms of what we will ultimately fund within round 2. To address the question about the St. James Parish government question, we had 2 projects that were originally submitted. The total project was above the $15 million cap, but the parish actually can commit funds within the project in excess of the $15 million cap, and CDBG would only cover that $15 million. So that was the distinction in between the ineligibility designation that we gave to St. James.
So if St. James agrees to pay the balance over the 15 million, we can add them to the list?
That's the same thing we did with,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
Right, but that's what Commissioner Weber was confused about, was that one didn't, they weren't given the opportunity to say, yeah, we'll make up the difference and add us to the list.
The distinction was these parishes made it within the application. So if you can commit those funds, just send us an email and we can note it within the parish application, and you all will have that for review as well.
Commissioner, go ahead, sir.
Am I understanding OCD correctly that we probably need to take another crack at this? Not that I'm not trying to say that we've missed it. I mean, we did what we thought we were supposed to do, but evidently what y'all also wanted us to do was not just rank these low, medium, and high, each project individually, but also rank them in terms of what's the.
That's not what they told us.
Well, but what I'm not, that milk's already been spilled. I guess what I'm saying is, in other words, from here, we need to go do a criteria ranking based on which ones of these are, which is ARBC's number 1, which is ARBC's number 2. Is that what y'all are suggesting?
Would that be helpful?
I don't think we're asking for a ranking from the region. That's not in the program documents, is it?
No.
I think the distinction that you're trying to make is that you talked about high and medium projects. If those are priorities for the commission, for the region, they need to be ranked as high.
So I understand now, it's clear, if it's a high priority, even if doesn't meet one of the categories is regional impact, even if it doesn't have a high regional impact, if it's a priority, we need to rate that as high. If we want it on the list, only the highs are going to be considered. So if it's one of our priorities, we need to rate it high across the board and then come back and prioritize those.
I would clarify a little bit. I wouldn't assume that only your high priority projects have a potential to get funded. We've got a $250 million round 2 with a total of $400 million worth of projects out there across the state, some of which may not ultimately wind up being low to moderate income benefit based on further modeling and exploration. And so I wouldn't make any assumptions about only submitting your high priority. I think that it just provides additional information as the working group is looking and scoring these projects as to where you had them in that high, medium, low. So don't cut yourself short on projects you submit.
Right.
Because the 200, remember, the 250 is a lot more than was allocated before, and so there will be a lot more projects funded.
Gotcha.
So,
So
I mean,
still need to stay high.
yeah, it almost makes you, I mean, I'm sorry, I apologize, but it almost makes you wonder why we even scored them. Go ahead, Commissioner Whitmore.
So I guess as a commission, can we take another look at this and then somehow put notation in our comments and our rankings for y'all to interpret based on that? I think we need to take another shot at it, is my point.
Right.
And if we decide to do some internal ranking, we can do that. And then we can put notes in our submittal that, hey, these are the projects that we deem, and I don't think that's against the rules. So I think that's exactly what I suggest we do, is take another shot at this so we can do a little more appropriate ranking.
I didn't realize people didn't put notes in their rankings, because I did. I really emphasized.
But still, we need to do it. If we're going to achieve the ultimate goal here, is to really express our priorities as all of our ranking. We can choose to rank them, and then we can do those assessments, and then we can have those in our notes of our full submittal. But that's just my suggestion. I just think we need to take another shot at it.
And there are no constraints from the policies and procedures on any of that, just the August 31st deadline for submitting your list of projects. Also, we'd like to look at that list that you have to make sure there's not any discrepancy between what we said should go out to you and what you have, in fact. So if we could get that to Janaea, and we'll make sure that the two lists are in
The
sync.
deadline for 31st, right?
Correct. Today,
No, I mean, listen, I'm all
or
in
have a
favor of
special
having-
meeting?
Special meeting, you could.
Exactly.
You have to call another meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, so I
This
was
is too
just,
important.
I was just discussing with Mr. Bankston. So, talk
So
about,
I think the appropriate maybe is a motion to set a special meeting before, and to make sure that we've got the final list. Because, for example, I'll just give you one example. In St. Gabriel, it shows low to moderate of only 28%. I'm very questionable in my mind, knowing St. Gabriel the way it is. So there were some issues internally in all this, but I would suggest that somebody make a motion to set a meeting at the commission office. We'll have it public. People can come and make any comments, and any of these individuals, make sure that we have St. James if it needs to be added. I think you may need to make an amendment to your application, but I think but we need to have that done before the 31st. Since we also have some issues concerning executive director, that could possibly be another meeting that could be added in that interim.
Do we need to make a motion to table the current action item, or the current piece of the agenda?
Nobody's made a motion to accept it or reject it, so there's nothing on the agenda, nothing on the table right now. So,
Yes.
Clint,
So let me check some dates here. So I'd like to make a motion that we hold a special meeting, and I would suggest the dates of either the 28th, 29th of August to do as well as a reassessment of our project priorities for round 2, as well as any other emergency items that need to be added to that special agenda.
okay, I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Quintmall, and do I have a second by Commissioner Harold?
Any opposition?
Any opposition? So moved.
Let's decide 28th or 29th.
Which day? I don't know which day for sure. He said 28th or 29th,
Let's do 29th.
10 a.m.?
10 a.m.
And how do we go about quickly getting what y'all do that day to LWI in time? Like email, we can email them what y'all voted on? and it'd be-
Pat, is that
Sure.
approvable? So we email them to LWI. Okay.
And the location to be determined.
You said the office?
Location to be determined.
Oh, okay.
At the office, I think is the easiest. Yes.
Yeah. At the ARBC office.
Well, to be determined.
Okay. All right. Next item is LWI Regional Coordinator.
Okay, next item is regional coordinator updates for LWI Region 9. I think we've touched on as much as we could touch on in regards to LWI Region 9 Round 2 projects. We don't have a coordinator. We are the coordinator. And it sounds like if we submit an application that we may get some assistance and compensation to help us do this even better. Okay, next item on the agenda under old business is Stoker Brown. Any public comments on that? Come on up, Stoker.
Good morning. Stoker Brown with CSRS. I've put a proposal together based on your request at the last meeting to continue operation and maintenance as well as software costs for the online map and to review public feedback and update the parameters in anticipation of creating the flood inundation map version 2.0.
Any questions? Okay, all right, sounds good. You got us a copy of your proposal?
It's in the packet.
Okay, excellent. All right.
Just be aware that the proposal, if it's going to be placed in a contractual, that it will have to be, this is just a proposal, it'd have to be modified to comply with the requirements of a professional service contract for Louisiana that we've adopted. So if it's pleasure, any motion needs to be that authorize a professional service contract consistent with what we previously have approved be authorized. So do we have a motion? Gary?
I don't know if you can hear me, Stoker. Thank you for putting the quote together. You're indicating that you guys can have the review of the public feedback and the updated parameters done within 3 months, but that the map won't be updated for 12 months? Am I confused by that?
So the map, the second item, which is online map operation and maintenance, that's not to create the flood inundation map version 2.0. The actual creation of a version 2.0 is not included in this. I suggest we wait until the LWI is finished with their Region 9 model so that there's a new base output to also create the next version of the map as well as the updated parameters. So that's not included in here. That is just for 12 months, 1 year's worth of making sure the online map stays operational, there's no issues with it, and that it's accessible to the public.
So what's task one? Tell me what we're going to get out of task one.
So task one is where we're going to take, and I went back and looked, there's about 60 online feedback points that were from the public. We're going to take that information. They submitted whether or not the map of inundation near their home was accurate. If it was inaccurate, they provided, no, it wasn't 5 inches, it was 1 foot. They provided photos or any other documentation that could help validate that. We're going to take that information, go back to the known high watermark elevations, gauge elevations, and see if those points and that information is corroborated. If we need to, we've also included some time to reach out to those, to the public to request any additional information, ask questions. They provided either a phone number or an email address. So essentially, we're going to take all that information and look at whether or not we need to add additional control points to the flood inundation map algorithm, I guess you would call it. There's a pretty elaborate process on how you take a model output, add additional parameters, control points in order to create the flood inundation map as it is. So we would be updating those parameters in anticipation of once the new base map is produced to create a version 2.
Okay. All right. One more question.
Oh, no, I guess I'm at comment stage here.
Comment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is for my colleagues to consider. I don't think we need to be in the map business.
Amen.
I think this is a tremendous liability for this organization. I think we need to pull the map off of the website. We as a parish do not release the flood data for that very specific purpose. We have been lucky up to date, and I think that I'm going to make a motion that we immediately pull it down until we can further investigate the liability that we may be exposing homeowners to. So I'm going to put that motion on the floor. Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Quintmall to take this down. Second by Commissioner Harrell. Any comments?
Have we ever explored that before, Mr. Larry, about potential liability by having that hosted? Or?
Well, the original, to get on the site, there is a agreement that you understand there's a waiver of liability, similar waiver of liability that LSU uses on its site, and it is the same waiver of liability that's used on other sites. We have not been sued by anybody, but I can tell you, anybody with $300 can file a suit. So, there's always that potential and concern. But do I personally believe that we are protected from liability? I think we are protected from any potential liability, but you can always file a lawsuit. So,
any more comments, Commissioner Harrell?
Yeah, I just don't see why we need to be in the mapping business. That's not what we're here for. There's other avenues to get this information. I can call FEMA any day of the week and get information on flooded homes. We have to deal with it constantly on elevations and acquisitions. It's available. I don't see why ARBC should be funding something that we can get for free.
Commissioner Quintmall, please.
So I don't want to pretend that this is just going to go to waste, okay? There is a lot of modeling in the future this could be utilized for. It was very expensive to start. It was not approved by this particular commission. It was approved prior to us. With that being said, I don't want to pretend that we can't utilize this feature in the future for this commission or other things. I worry about the liability because I know it's out there from my personal experience in government. And so, again, when do we stop paying for this? When's the deadline? So 2016, is it a decade from 2016 that we decide to stop paying for this service, or we want to pay for it forever? And so there's some serious concerns about, what this is being utilized, how long we should incur this cost, and there's just too many unknowns. I can tell you, I am cautious of the liability. I think it's there. I think when you can go onto a site and anybody can use this, whether a home is flooded or not, is a real concern for me. and how much water it got, and that may dissuade a buyer, and we may be liable for that, regardless of what a disclaimer says when you enter the site. So, I would like, again, my motion still stands. I just want to make the point that we can use this for the future. It's not a cost that has been incurred that just goes to waste, that we can still use this tool in the future, and we should plan to. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like first of all, we have your proposal, and it doesn't sound like an end-all, that this, still may be some use for our board.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So, to you, Mark Harrell, saying you can call up FEMA, this is not FEMA data. This is above and beyond FEMA data, and it's even taken it a step forward, further beyond the LWI model output data. It's taken that information and actual surveyed elevations of water surface elevations. We can make a model as accurate as possible that we try. It's never going to be exactly accurate. This is an additional modification to that. So the information that's provided in this data is far beyond what you will get from any FEMA information.
I agree with you 100%. However, when you start doing BCAs or whenever you start trying to get approval for an elevation or an acquisition, you're going to go by FEMA's elevation. They're high water marks. They send people out and they have all that in their documentation. They're not going to let us go use someone else's. So for the FEMA funding, which most of us do on a regular basis, we have to use their documentation.
I understand. The intent of this map is not to use it for that purpose. The intent of this map is to try and represent an accurate, what happened in the 2016 flood, to provide the community more real flood information and risk. I understand, President Coitmont, that you feel that there's a liability there. I'm no lawyer, so I don't know the details of that. We did work with Larry to identify what information was needed to be before you could enter the site and put that on. So we tried to limit liability as much as possible. Again, I'm no lawyer, so I can't really speak more to that, other than I think that this is the exact type of information that needs to be coming out of the Amite River Basin Commission, because you are a watershed entity, and this is, in my opinion, your duty to disseminate information about flood risk throughout your basin. And this is exactly that. In terms of spending money forever in perpetuity, this is only for a 1 year. This is a 1 year cost to continue the online maps operation. If you would like to continue it, I would come back for another year, or if at that point you want to continue it further than a year, a 3-year contract, it's up to you. Whether eventually you assume these costs and you hire your own GIS department and have somebody run it, and you just bring it completely in-house, it's up to you. At the moment, this is to continue it for 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stoker.
I have a comment. When the old commission put this together, it was sort of pioneering technology as far as an inundation map like this. One of and they spouted out all the kind of things it can be used for. One of the main focuses on it was for the public, because most of the public doesn't have access to FEMA or those records or anything. This is where local people can go and just check the area. I'm very concerned, like Clint, about the liability, but if we're okay on the liability factor, this is something for just the general population, an easy place to get to see what happened in 2016. At some point, that's going to become moot, because we're going to have another flood. So we'll want a new, if we, like Mark, I don't know that we're in the mapping business, but we've already paid a lot of money for this. and just to pull it down and deprive the public from it. I don't know how many people. Can you see on the site how much traffic we get to that?
I believe we can see how much traffic. I don't have any of those statistics right now. I can tell you that we've received approximately 60 feedback points from the public.
Okay. Well, it was, that was my comment. It was mainly for my concern, my interest with it was mainly for the public to be a public service so they could see, get an idea of what happened in 2016.
Thing kicks on, there we go. So I just kind of want to clarify. I don't want to just throw this tool away, okay? It's a very important tool. We spend a lot of money on it. I want to take it and bring it in-house. Eventually, we would like to have somebody keep up with this tool and enhance it. I would like our executive director and possibly our consulting company at one point to help assist in that. And so before we make any decisions to do that in-house and incur that cost, we'd like to have some personnel hired or some companies hired to help us assist with that. And this is by no means taking away from the quality of work that Stoker Brown does. I have the utmost respect for him and the modeling. I can just tell you, when people are looking for a place to move and live, and you pull up this map, you can say, well, just don't move here, right? And what does that do? Okay? I got a group of houses moved flooded in this subdivision. Don't move here, right? That's going to happen. And I don't believe it's, I think if we're going to, I think we have some liability there, and it's certainly not the right thing to do either, from an ethical standpoint. So, again, my motion still stands.
Gary?
I just want to throw out there that in the course of my work and in the course of buying multiple homes in my life, I've utilized the LSU Ag Center flood map website multiple times to find out about whether or not a property may or may not be in a flood zone. I don't think this is necessarily delineating that type of stuff. And LSU's been doing that for well over a decade. And I don't know what kind of potential issues they've run into from a liability standpoint or risk management standpoint, but they've been able to successfully navigate that process while providing a statewide interactive map that actually will show you elevations, flood zones, extents, that type of thing. It does not replace the flood insurance rate map from the FEMA Map Service Center, but it does provide an extremely robust amount of information that I think homeowners utilize all the time whenever they're making a decision regarding where to buy a house. And LSU, I don't think, has incurred any type of adverse.
I think what LSU's doing is acting like a local clearinghouse, overlaying, kind of summarizing what FEMA has available where you don't have to navigate this whole plethora of FEMA maps to get you where you want to get.
Yeah.
More localized clearinghouse. So, Commissioner Quintmall, you clarify you had a motion?
Yeah, still on the floor. I got a second, too.
Okay. Could you clarify your motion for us?
Yes, at this juncture in time, I'd like to not approve this contract and also pull the site off of the web until we can do a full analysis of the impacts of what we're putting out there, since we know that it's not accurate, until we have a full representation, but to keep the product in-house as a useful tool in the future that we can consider and updating and improving through something from a different act in the future.
And we have a second from Commissioner Harrell. Any more public comments? Is there any opposition? Hearing none. Bryn Ferlito, Commissioner Ferlito abstains from this. Hearing none. Motion's adopted. All right, moving on to our next agenda item under old business is an update on our drone video. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Is the ARBC annual plan.
Any public comment?
Any public comments on the concept and idea of the ARBC annual plan? It's due at the end of this year. Okay. So,
Turn it over to Brandon to pause and he's the one that's this here.
yeah. So what we've done so far is the intent for our annual plan is obviously, we're not going to be able to do this in-house. We would like to, but if you've looked at annual plans, they have a nice table of contents. They have nice imagery and maps, graphs, dollar figures, spreadsheets, so forth. So might have to turn it over to a contractor through CPRA. And rather than having just an open-ended type of contract on what we want to do, get an annual plan, give us an annual plan, we've kind of drafted a working draft scope of services. Basically what that would entail is just kind of develop a format for the annual plan, the cover letter and so forth. And, you know, you can read the handout that I gave you with the highlights. And everybody got this? So just take a look at this, and I think it's in our best interest to have kind of a draft scope of services before we go into a contract and award a contract to a contractor to do our annual plan. The only thing that scares me about this is that we've known about that we've had an annual plan that needs to be done, and I haven't got any feedback from anybody, not one board member. So, you know who drafted this? So, I welcome anybody, I encourage anybody, and I challenge anybody to come up with something better than this and expand upon this to where we can get this taken care of and meet our goals and objectives that's required by law. Brent, can you shed any comments on what your insight for this?
I think I'm on. Yes. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think we're ready to go when the commission's ready to go. So this looks like a good work, as you said, working draft of a scope to get an annual plan taken care of. I would say that I would like to need to have Larry and David kind of review things to make sure that we're conforming, I guess, with our contractual requirements to get a task order out. So I will leave it certainly up to the commission on how you want to deal with this. I think in the interest of time, if we can take this, perhaps fine tune it to make sure it fits with our contractual requirements, and get a task order proposal back to the commission, or back to you, John, at the executive committee, however you all want to handle that, for your final approval, then we can roll on getting a task order issued.
Okay, sounds good. That's.
A motion by somebody to.
Do I have a motion? Clint, Commissioner Quitman.
I want to make a motion that we, there we go. Just want to make a motion that we allow the executive committee to work with CPRA and adopting and approving the task of obtaining a annual master plan report.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor, second by Commissioner Rayford, and you had a question.
Yeah, I guess my question comes into the fact that, and it has with the item that we're dealing with here and a little bit later, executive director, because I also believe that if we're going to have an annual plan, we got to have a director that also knows and be involved in that process to look at some of the things that we're going to want to do as a commission. And I know we're getting ready to talk about it, but to me, I think it's also imperative to have that person on board as soon as possible to try to help get our comments, our concerns out, so we'll be able to try to address this in a timely fashion. And I don't disagree. We need to move forward, but at some point, I hate to be the person coming in on the back end and don't even know what we're looking at, what we're trying to accomplish, particularly from a director's standpoint. That's all. But I will second that recommendation.
I would imagine we could probably potentially maybe have somebody in place by then to address that.
We issue tasks every 2 weeks. So I don't know where we are in the cycle right now, but depending on where we are in the cycle, at most it would be 2 weeks.
So Bren, December 31st, we would like to obviously get a draft of an annual plan before it becomes final, so we can do our back and forth and approve whether we feel good with it or not, or if we missed anything. Is that doable?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it has to be doable by law.
I just wanted to hear you say that.
It is. I mean, I think we should be able to issue a task, well, depending on the pleasure of the commission, I guess, and how this executive director discussion goes. But we should be able to issue a task by the end of this month. I would suggest that a good draft could be developed probably within a couple of months. That would give, a November, December timeframe for a review of a draft and sort of finalizing things.
I've been in government for a while, and I watch it every year. People have a lot of ambitions about work in November and work in December and even January. But what I have noticed is come Thanksgiving, things kind of wane a lot. And you may be there, but people you need to work with aren't. So just keep that in mind,
Using that PTO before they lose it.
So we have a motion and a second.
Any opposition?
Any opposition? Motion adopted.
We're going to take this working draft. Our planning team and our attorneys will review it. If there are any tweaks that need to be made, they will be made. And then that tweaked document will be resubmitted to the executive committee for approval or not.
Correct.
We'll issue the task and move out.
Yes. We would like to have some comments on this working scope of services as soon as possible. All right, moving on our agenda under old items, old business. Update on our drone video. We had an intergovernmental agreement with Ascension Parish. Thank you, Clint. It was going to be free of charge, but it appears that perhaps the Comeet River Diversion, the Army Corps of Engineers has done something. Mark, you said on the Comeet River Diversion Task Force, can you kind of give us a little idea of what do we need to do this? Or?
I don't think, I personally think they did a fabulous job on putting it together. The video was good.
Okay.
The project is stumbling, but the video is good.
You see the parts that are not done.
Yeah.
Commissioner Quimmo.
Yeah, so what I would suggest, and I had conversations about with a couple of members, is let's put this on hold for now. We got a video. Let's wait for more improvements to be made, and if there's the need for us to do an additional one, then at that point in time, let's do that.
Sounds good. Any public comments? Okay, moving on. Project committee status and discussion. The idea here was we had formed a project committee, and a lot has evolved and changed since then. But the idea was back in the beginning is that we wanted to see, as we come together as this commission, newly formed commission, what do we have out there? What's already going on? Where's it at? What part of the basin is it located in? Is it a past project? Is it a current project or a future project? Who's involved? How much money? Is there any needs? And we were going to do like a working map, a project inventory map on our website to be completely transparent for us and the public to see what the ARBC has and what they're working on. And Gary, could you give us a little update about where we may be with that? And I understand because you've been handling a lot of stuff, and so anything you might be able to shed some light.
I don't
know if I'm on or not, but now we sent initial emails out to several parishes requesting project listings and whatnot. We got some feedback from some. We didn't get feedback from others. Also had some initial discussions with another LWI region who did something that caught your eye. Ms. Keelia Bingham, who's the watershed coordinator for LWI Region 5. I can touch base with her again, but we have not put anything together. We've had a lot of plates spinning in the air, so that's my
This is not
fault.
an urgent situation, but ultimately, we would like to get there to have a working map
Yeah.
and list for the public to see, because, you know, what is ARBC doing? You know, you could see real quick.
We'll get into it forthwith.
Okay. All right. Sir? Yes, sir. Commissioner Harrell.
Commissioner O'Neill, I'd just like to express my disappointment that you haven't gone forward with this. Thank you, though, so much.
I'd like to second that, so.
Thank you, buddy.
All right. Yes, keep it light. Moving on the agenda, our next item is status of the ARBC Executive Director search. Gary?
Make a motion for. If we could, I'd like to make a motion for the ARBC to go into executive session to discuss that topic.
We got a motion by Gary, second by Commissioner Harrell.
So in order to do that, you have to have a full roll call.
Commissioner.
So we're going to add that to an item under 11, new business, as an executive session item,
Needs
so
to
you get
actually
full.
Motion to add executive session to.
Larry, explain this.
Okay. The motion first needs to be, because executive session is not on the agenda, there needs to be a motion for the board to add going into executive session to discuss personnel matters. That's the first motion, and if that's adopted, then you have to have a formal vote of going into executive session, and that has to be a roll call vote. Okay, so we have a motion by committee. We have a motion, and we have a second.
I would say, do we want to go ahead and finish everything else out before we just clear the room?
That's up to the committee.
I mean, it's just.
Yeah, let's do that.
In the famous words of another
Let's do
commissioner, to
that.
spare the public.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so we'll save that to our last. All right, moving on. Setting ARBC meeting locations.
Any public comment?
Any public comments on our meeting locations or suggestions? Any discussion? So, I think we did EBR, we did Livingston, now in Ascension.
Ascension, and I've already scheduled it, if y'all good with the state capitol, through the rest of the year.
Okay, that sounds good. Any comments on that? Public comments? State capitol? Jack?
Good.
Okay. All right. State capitol. All right. Next item under old business is our Comey River Diversion Canal project status.
It's attached to your.
It's, you look in your agenda.
It's this document here. We continue to monitor the monthly meeting with the DOTD and John.
Army Corps.
And the Army Corps. John and I generally, it's a Zoom meeting. It's available for any of y'all. We've asked that you all been invited to participate in that regard.
The main thing here lately is that there's been a hurdle with Florida Gas. It looks like there may be some movement in that regard, that where it didn't seem like there were any. Maybe. Also, the funding, as you know, due to the inflation cost, the project cost doubled. And we've been assured by the Corps and Congress, Congressman Graves, that the funding is there for this project, and it will be set. Other than that, Larry? Mark?
And Commissioner Harrell sits on the task force meeting, and they met in the legislature, and they recently got a report, an update from the Corps. We have also taken that update and placed it on the website,
Yes.
along with the video flyover. So that's
Okay.
now, you can view that on the website.
Yes, so anyone who wants to see the latest, greatest update is on our ARBC website and the drone video of the project.
Correct.
On the website. Sounds good. Thank you, Tony. Commissioner Harrell.
The only thing I'd like to add is the date is going to the end of '25 now for possible completion. So when we started looking at negative impacts of projects around the region, whenever all of us started talking about doing projects, we took in consideration the Commit River diversion being complete. It's not going to be complete anytime soon. So keep in mind that that will create a larger negative impact on Livingston Parish on just about any project in the region. We are the dumping ground for everyone. So I'm not saying that anything other than that, just keep that in mind when we make decisions on projects.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any more comments? Okay, new business. Under new business, we have a Louisiana compliance questionnaire for audit 2022 through 2023.
Yes.
Larry?
This is standard. We do this each year and provide this to our auditor, who is Diaz, Dupuy, and Ruiz. And this just answers certain questions. It hasn't changed over the years, and it gives information, but this has to have a motion and approval in order to provide this to the auditor.
Okay, does anybody have any public comments on this compliance questionnaire? This was sent out a week ago. You've had a chance to look at it. Any comments?
Do I have a motion?
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Rayford. Second by
O'Neill.
Commissioner O'Neill. Any opposition? Motion adopted. Moving on, next item is hazard mitigation grant program opportunities. As y'all know, the Region 9 was awarded a little more money than other parts of the state. And we thought it would be a good idea just to let the parishes know, if you don't already know, and the public know, if you don't already know, what may be available out there to help you in regards to hazard mitigation. And Mr. Gary O'Neill is here to give a presentation and very good explanation of how this program might work for you.
Gary O'Neill, Walker, Louisiana. We're going to go super, super quick because I know we have a whole lot more to talk about in executive session, but I did want to let y'all know, at the end of June, John sent out an email where he got communicated to with GOSEP and Casey Tingle and Jeffrey Gearing, where each LWI region was awarded a certain amount of what's called HMGP funding. It is a federally funded but state-administered grant program for hazard mitigation. I think there's several, I would imagine all of our parishes up here are extremely familiar with it. Some of our consultants may be as well. But I did just want to go ahead and let you guys know that every LWI region got at least $1 million. Several LWI regions got $3.5 million. We were one of the regions that was blessed with $3.5 million, that higher amount. Just to let you know, it's available after any declared disaster. I believe this was due to Hurricane Ida funding. GOSEP gave us this funding, and I believe it is actually, there's typically a 25% cost share for HMGP, which means whatever project was out there, we're going to have to come up with 25 cents on the dollar. In this case, for Hurricane Ida, the cost share is waived according to Jeffrey and GOSEP. So this is, and for all intents and purposes, what you would call as close to free money as it gets when it comes to doing projects like this. You've got to be an eligible sub-applicant that participated in a hazard mitigation plan. I believe Jeffrey and GOSEP are going to work with us in regards to that. So whereas typically a parish would have to be the applicant, in this case, ARBC may actually be able to be the applicant in this case. But I think based on our project committee and which projects we select, if it's easier for a parish to do that, GOSEP will work with us. But again, I mentioned the cost share being waived. There is one bugaboo here, and that's going to be the benefit cost analysis. If you're not familiar with the benefit cost analysis, it is the black box of this grant program, and most people, when you use that term BCA, they want to use a 4-letter acronym for it. But anyway, we won't get into that. That is not on the slides here. But that is a requirement. Whatever project that comes out of this authority or this commission will have to be cost effective for the program. Also, phased projects are eligible as well. And what that means is if it's conceptual in nature, if there's not a lick of design, if there's not a lick of survey work done on it, we can still put it through the program and it will be funded. What kind of projects? Jeffrey's email indicated that you could do planning activities, you can do all sorts of funding, and you can look at the typical project types here. I will say that in the case of Region 9, having spoken with Jeffrey and having spoken with most of y'all, we've got plenty of planning work on our plate, so to speak. CPRA is assisting us with both an annual plan and a master plan. I would strenuously suggest to the commission that we try to actually find a flood risk reduction project. I'm sure we've got a couple laying between the couch cushions amongst the parishes that are here. You could do residential elevations and buyouts. As some people have stated here, I feel like that's putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. I think what we really want to do is address the actual issue of flooding with this funding, if at all possible. It may not be something that's as multi-jurisdictional as, you know, some of the other projects we've considered, but we could really address some pressing issues with this funding. And you could also do some generators or some lift station elevations like that. Typically, that's not really addressing what we're here for, which is flood risk reduction. Next steps, again, I'm trying to really breeze through this. The original application deadline, some of you parishes may be aware, it was actually, I believe, within about a week's time. GOSEP, through Jeffrey Gearing and GOSEP, have indicated that there is an extension that has been requested. It has not been approved yet by FEMA. They are optimistic that would potentially, and I know this is being streamed out there for the whole world, it would potentially give us approximately another month's time. So what I would suggest to the commission is that we hustle up on this and almost vet a project for this program. At the same time, we're vetting projects for for round 2 of LWI and the $100 million we were blessed with at last week's commission meeting. So applicable timelines, I would say this needs to get done within a month's time. So we really need to probably put an emphasis on this. At our special meeting, we should probably actually, whatever may not get prioritized in that list, we may want to have as a fallback to kind of slot it in for this $3.5 million. But if any of you are actually curious as to what types of projects this might fund, I'm happy to give you this slide deck, and that link down there will show you FEMA's what's called the Mitigation Action Portfolio. That's just a listing of projects they've done nationally, and in some cases, well, in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico as well, not quite internationally, but different projects they've funded using this funding stream, whether it's, flood risk reduction, planning, building codes, things of that nature. So I just wanted to put it on y'all's radar. We received this email a certain time ago, and the deadline is coming up, but we're going to get an extension on it, so we do need to kind of hop on it. It's not $100 million, but $3.5 million with no cost share is nothing to sneeze at. So I think that's it.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
When that information came out, did GOSEP make a few suggestions on projects? Did it not say drainage, and drainage? They gave us 3 options.
Three suggestions,
Three
all of
suggestions.
which FEMA would call flood risk reduction or drainage improvement projects. So there are other regions that I've spoken to that are actually going to do planning activities with this funding. Those regions don't have several $1 million from CPRA to put together a master plan and an annual plan and things like that. So there are other regions that are doing other things with it, but in this case, we're ahead of the game, as some folks have stated already today. So I really think we could actually use this to actually do good work in flood risk reduction. So that would be my suggestion. That was GOSEP's suggestion as well. Thank you, Mr. Mark. I know y'all are tired of hearing me talk already, so I'll wrap it up. Thank y'all.
More questions? No. Thank you, Gary, very much. Next item on our agenda is general, non-agenda items, public comment period. Any public comments? Anybody like to tell any ARBC anything on their minds, or suggestions or recommendations of how better run this board? Okay.
To add executive session.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor to add to the agenda executive session concerning the selection of the executive director. That has to be done without objection. So if there's any objection to it, we can't add it. Is there a second to that?
You did second.
Yeah, all right, we have a second, yeah. Is there any opposition, I guess?
Yeah, is there any opposition to what Larry just recommended?
No, not to add it, but there has to be, now, if there's no opposition to that, there has to be a motion to go into executive session concerning personnel matters, and that has to be a roll call vote.
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
So we had no opposition to the motion and adding in the second. And now we have a motion by Commissioner Parker and second by Commissioner Harrell to
go into
executive session. Tony, can I get a roll call?
Okay, Mr. Bailey's absent, Carter's absent, Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Quintmall,
Yes.
Weber? Okay, Ferlito? Fitch? Harrell?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
O'Neill?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Rayford?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. All right, we're back out of executive session. And do we have a motion on the floor?
I'd like to make a motion, President Clark. I would like to suggest a special meeting on August the 29th, location to be determined, and also to authorize the Emmett River Basin Commission to contact the selected applicants for the executive director position to engage them on potential availability for interviews for the executive director position.
And those individuals are?
And,
No.
A second.
okay. We've got a motion on the floor by Commissioner O'Neill and a second by Commissioner Quintmall. Any opposition?
Do we have to take a roll call, or this is just a?
Any opposition? Okay, hearing no opposition, motion adopted.
Like to make a motion?
Make a motion to,
Make a motion, we go into executive session briefly to discuss the ranking of projects.
okay, got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Quintmall
To add that.
to add that to item two.
The agenda. It's already it's actually on the agenda,
Yes.
so it's just really going into reconsidering the actions in reference to project, LWI Round 2 information, so
Okay,
yeah, that has to be a roll call.
okay, got a second by Commissioner Parker. Roll call, Tony?
I put it all away. Hold on one second.
Okay,
Okay, it's all right, I got it. Bailey is absent, Carter's absent, Clark,
yes.
Whitmore? Weber? Okay, Ferlito?
Yes.
Finch? I said Finch. Harrell?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
O'Neill?
Yes.
Parker? Rayford?
Yes.
Okay, thank y'all.
Need a motion to return to regular session first.
Yep.
Motion.
Okay, all right. We have a motion to return to regular session by Commissioner O'Neill and a second by Commissioner Harris. All right. So do we have any public comments? Thank you all for attending. Sorry the meeting took so long, but we got a lot of great things done. I think every board member should be proud of what you've achieved today. And stay tuned.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Quinmore, second by Commissioner Harrell. Any opposition?